Welcome, tankers, to the Ground Nation Guide for War Thunder. In this episode, we'll be going over the French tank tree. The full playlist is linked below.
France was among one of the first countries to experiment with tanks all the way back in the Great War. Their doctrine in World War II was similar to that of the British, consisting of infantry tanks called chars and cavalry tanks called automitrailleuses. The infantry tanks supported foot soldiers as they marched into battle, while the cavalry were used for reconnaissance or exploiting breakthroughs in enemy lines. Despite being better armored than their German counterparts, French tanks suffered from inferior tactics and lack of radios. After the war though, France experimented with various designs featuring really unique elements like autoloaders and oscillating turrets, which were rare to see. Vehicles like the AMX-13 proved to be very effective and were popular in export markets as well. Designs began to standardize with main battle tanks like the AMX-30 and the later Leclerc, which were strong in their own right. The French tank tree is split into 5 lines, those being the light, medium and heavy tank lines, the SPA line, and lastly the tank destroyer line. Like their history in real life, early French tanks are very lackluster in terms of performance. The tree gets bearable with the later vehicles and American imports, but really starts to get good at tier 4 with the aforementioned post-war designs. These can be some of the most fun tanks in the tree, as they combine great firepower with very fast reloads. The MBTs are not the best out there, but like I said, they can definitely be competent if used properly. Starting off, we have rank 1, which is definitely one of the ranks of all time. First up, the light tank line. We have the AMC-34, H-35, FCM-36, as well as the AMD and AMC-35. We'll be skipping the first 3 since they are, without a doubt, some of the worst tanks in the entire game. Maybe the worst, actually. If you thought Japanese tier 1 tanks were bad, these will be straight up miserable, with bad mobility, armor, and guns that are barely better than 50 cals. The Panhard 35 is thankfully a lot more viable though. It has a top speed of 72 kilometers an hour or 45 miles per hour and a decent 25mm cannon. With a couple mobility modifications, it can be a great flanker, but it has no armor, so stay out of sight. Meanwhile, the AMC is more conventional with average mobility and firepower. Use it like a support vehicle or light flanker. In the medium tank line, we have the H-39 and the Saumur 35. To be perfectly honest, these two have pretty mediocre guns and mobility, but their armor is surprisingly good. Thanks to their slope design, they can bounce and withstand a lot of enemy shells at their BR, especially when angled. Although the firepower is underwhelming, they make up for it with shoulder stabilizers and excellent gun depression, allowing for strong hold-down positioning. They have a very small number of crew members though, so if the enemy manages to penetrate, you'll probably die in one hit. Play them like brawlers, but keep some allies nearby. The heavy tank line contains the R-35 and the T2, a pair of infantry support vehicles. Firepower is not great, mobility is absolutely awful, but armor is pretty good. Their top speeds barely reach 20 kilometers per hour or 12 miles per hour, so enemies will be running rings around you if you're not careful. The only noteworthy thing is their shoulder stabilizers and the insane gun depression on the D2 with a whopping minus 18 degrees. Other than that, there's not much else to say. Like with the mediums, your best bet is brawling. For anti-airs, we have the P7T anti-air. Just by looking at this machine, you can understand what it's all about. For heavy machine guns slapped on top of a tractor. It's reminiscent of the early Soviet gas trucks, with no armor whatsoever, half decent mobility, and sufficient firepower. The quad 13.2mm machine guns are good against both aircraft and the sides of light tanks, but again, it can get killed by a gust of wind, so do not expect anything crazy. Lastly, in the tank destroyer line, we have the AMR-35, Lorraine 37L, and the SAU-40. Unlike most of the previous tanks, these three actually feature good firepower, with 25, 47, and 75mm cannons respectively. That comes at a cost though, that being armor and mobility. The AMR is the only one with a good top speed, and thanks to its small size, it can be used as a flanker or ambusher. The Lorraine is the slowest and least protected of the bunch, with exposed crew members and a weak engine. Its cannon is very powerful for its BR though, so stay out of sight and snipe enemies off. Lastly, the SAU. It is definitely one of the ugliest tanks out there, but its cannon is pretty strong, and it's the only tier 1 French tank that can fire APHE. With the exception of the giant cupola, its armor is enough to stop shells at long range, so keep your distance and fire away. Up next is Tier 2, which thankfully features some better tanks. The light tank line contains the AMD-35 PAC and the Crusader Mark II. As the name suggests, the first tank is the AMD-35 but with a 5cm PAC cannon, the same one found on the German Puma. With this upgrade in firepower, the Panhard becomes an even bigger threat to the enemy with great APHE and APCR shells. Armor is terrible as always though, so watch your surroundings. In contrast, the Crusader Mark II is a cruiser tank instead of a recon one. Despite not being as agile as the AMD, its mobility is still very respectable and its armor is slightly better. Its cannon might be a bit underwhelming at this BR, but if you manage to flank the enemy, you should be good to go. The medium tank line briefly turns into an American import line with the M3A3 and the M4A1. The Stuart is a classic light tank with great mobility, limited armor, and a punchy cannon. It's like the middle ground between the AMD-35 and the Crusader, with great top speed and enough armor to stop machine gun rounds. For an actual medium tank though, look no further than the M4A1 Sherman. Like we've said many times throughout the series, the Sherman is a jack of all trades with decent mobility, armor, and firepower. It doesn't excel in any given field, but it can perform adequately in pretty much anything. Use it to support your allies and slowly push the front lines. In the heavy tank line, we have the B1 bis and the II-C, a pair of absolute behemoths. The B1 is a pretty heavily armored battle boss with a 47mm main gun and the secondary 75mm. It can absorb pretty much any shell that gets fired at it, especially when angled, and the double cannon setup can catch a lot of players off guard. While neither gun is that powerful, a well-placed shot into an enemy weak spot can take them out. The II-C, on the other hand, is just a titan of a machine. It weighs 70 tons and features 12 crew members. It is a force to be reckoned with. Compared to the B1, it has a slightly more powerful gun but less armor. Regardless, the most blatant downside of both is their awful mobility, with a max speed of 30 and a mere 15 kilometers respectively. Therefore, brawling is the obvious choice, so get some allies to cover your flanks and become both the unstoppable force and the immovable object at the same time. In the SPA line, we have the CCKW-353 and the VTT-10. The CCKW carries a 40mm Bofors cannon, which, as you might have guessed, makes it pretty difficult to hit enemy aircraft. Against tanks though, it can shred pretty much anything at this BR, provided you don't get destroyed first. Make use of its good mobility to flank enemies and stay out of sight. The VTT-10 is much better against aircraft though, with the same quad 50 cal setup as on the M16. Like its American counterpart, it has a high fire rate and decent mobility, but armor is lacking. Keep an eye on your ammo count and take enemy planes down. As for tank destroyers, we have the M4A3 with a 105 cannon and the M10 GMC. These two play exactly like their domestic models. The Sherman 105 carries a big howitzer that can fire some deadly heat rounds, while the M10 is more of a sharpshooter thanks to its great 76mm cannon. Both of them can easily take enemy tanks out with some well-placed shots, but the 105 performs better at close quarters, while the M10 is more suited for long-range sniping. Something they share is their their terrible turret rotation rate, so if an enemy flanks you, it's pretty much over. That being said, both vehicles can be great additions to your lineup, but you have to know their limits and play to their strengths. Coming up next is tier 3, where the tree starts to get good. In the light tank line, we have the AMX-13 FL11 and the Uber 1951. These two are notorious for being fast, deadly, and most of all, annoying. They carry the same 75mm cannon mounted on an oscillating turret, carrying decent APHE rounds and having good depression angles. Their main difference is their hull. The AMX is built on a traditional tank hull, while the EBR is an 8x8 armored car. As a result, the former is a bit slower, but also has a smaller profile. The latter, however, can go up to 105 km per hour in both forward and reverse, making it an amazing flanker. That being said, they have practically no armor though, so either drive around the front lines or hide and ambush your opponents. For medium tanks, we have the M4A4 and the M4A4 SA50. The former is your run-in-the-mill Sherman. It's pretty much the same as your M4A1, but without a 50 cal and its armor being welded instead of cast. The SA50 variant is much more interesting though. It's the same as the predecessor, but with one key difference. This one has a long 75mm cannon with up to 200mm of penetration. This thing rivals the 17-pounder in terms of firepower, easily punching through anything at its BR. That being said, it's still mounted on a Sherman, so mobility and armor are not amazing. Use it like the Sherman Firefly to snipe enemies from a distance, or support your heavier allies. In the heavy tank line, you'll find the ARL-44 ACL1, the ARL-44, and the M4A3E2 Jumbo. The two ARL tanks are large, heavily armored vehicles inspired by German designs like the Panther and King Tiger. As with most heavy tanks, they prioritize armor over mobility, but they also offer respectable firepower, especially the latter variant. The ACL1 can shrug off small caliber rounds, but it struggles against more powerful weapons like tank destroyers or German pack guns. The second model boasts a very thick upper front plate, but also has a huge turret that can easily get penetrated. Like the King Tigers, the ARL-44s also store their ammo in the back of the turret, so you have to play cautiously. These tanks are best played in the support roles or at long range. The M4A3E2 Jumbo takes a different approach. It sacrifices firepower for even more armor. When angled properly, it can deflect nearly any shot at its battle rating. However, this comes at a cost of poor mobility and a relatively weak cannon. It excels as a frontline brawler, especially with teammates nearby, but you'll need to stay alert and protect your flanks. In the anti-air line, we have the AMX-13 DCA-40 and the TPK 641. The Défense contre avion, or the anti-air defense in English, is an AMX-13 with a 40mm anti-air cannon. It's pretty much a Bofors, but with double the fire rate and access to HVAP shells, which makes it more effective against both air and ground targets. It is also pretty good against tanks if you flank them, and thanks to the AMX-13 hull, it can do so pretty easily. As for the TPK, it carries two 20mm autocannons mounted on a 6x6 truck. Its main selling point is the crazy high fire rate that it has, with nearly 2000 shots per minute combined. This makes it a very effective anti-air, and with its great top speed, it can quickly relocate if necessary. As you might imagine though, it has no armor to speak of, so staying out of sight and on the move is crucial. The tank destroyer line contains the M44 and the M36B2. The M44 is an M44. This is the 6th time we're talking about it. I think you get the point by now. Get close, fire your big howitzer, relocate, etc. Same thing with the M36B2. It's a good tank destroyer with a hard-hitting cannon. Even its stock shells are great in their own right, but if you face especially heavy opponents, it gets access to hit FS as well. Mobility is decent, while armor leaves much to be desired. Stick to long-range engagements and avoid direct confrontations. Now we reach rank 4, which is where you see most of the unique French designs with oscillating turrets and autoloaders. In the light tank line we have the IMX-13. Its hull is pretty much the same as the FL-11 variant, but this time around it has the same 75mm cannon as the M4A4 SA-50. Not only that, but it also features a 5-second autoloader for the ready rack as well, something you don't find very easily at this battle rating. Combining the great mobility of the AMX-13, the firepower of the SA-50 cannon and the fast reload rate creates an excellent reconnaissance vehicle, capable of flanking the enemy team and taking out enemies from the shadows. The only thing that you have to worry about is your armor. Even anti-air vehicles can penetrate it, and it only has 3 crew members, so stay on the move and stay out of sight at all times. For medium tanks, you'll find the M26. Pershing is the replacement for the Sherman, and as such, its playstyle is very similar. It has decent armor, acceptable mobility, and a strong cannon. It's a solid jack of all trades that can do a bit of everything, but supporting or medium range sniping should be your priority. The heavy tank line contains the AMX M4. It's like a bigger, more powerful AMX-13, featuring a 90mm cannon with a 6.7 second autoloader, somewhat improved armor, and still having ample mobility. Just keep in mind that after 7 shots, the first stage ammo stowage will run out, and you'll face a long reload time before it's replenished. The main drawback of the AMX M4 is its large size, and its armor is definitely not strong enough to withstand much of anything. That being said, it's still a very versatile tank that performs best in a supporting role, close quarters battles, or for medium range sniping. In the SPA line we have the IMX-10P, an amphibious infantry fighting vehicle. Despite not being a dedicated anti-air, it can still perform decently with a 20mm autocannon that has a high rate of fire. Mobility is also pretty good, but armor is non-existent, as one might imagine. It's not an amazing anti-air, but it is a decent stopgap between the World War II and radar-based anti-air systems. Lastly, for the tank destroyers, we have the CA Lorraine and the ELC BIS. The Canon d'Assaut Lorraine is a casemate based on the AMX M4 with a 100mm cannon. Compared to the M4, it has much better mobility, a more potent cannon but lacks an autoloader and has less armor. It's a great light tank destroyer, being able to flank the enemy and reach some good vantage points before the main action starts. Just make sure to not get spotted, since its armor is really lackluster and it has a pretty long reload. The Engin Léger de Combat, on the other hand, is sort of like a prototype AMX-13. It has a great top speed of 80 km per hour or 50 miles per hour and has a strong 90mm cannon that carries heat FS. The main issue is that there are only 2 crew members inside the tank, and with its paper thin armor, you're pretty much dead if an enemy sees you. Make use of its small profile and speed to flank the enemy and stay out of sight. Tier 5 contains the pinnacle of the old French designs and the slow transition to the MBTs. For light tanks, we have the AML-90, AMX-1390 and the DF-105. Like we saw in the British episode, the Panhard AML is a highly agile reconnaissance vehicle with a very small size, great top speed and powerful cannon. It can go up to 90 km an hour or 56 miles an hour and carries heat FS rounds that can punch through 350mm of armor. The only few drawbacks are the low muzzle velocity, small number of shells, and the complete lack of armor. Even machine guns can take it out, so you have to stay on the move at all times. The AMX-1390, meanwhile, is, as you might expect, an AMX-13 with the 90mm cannon found on the AML. This replaces the solid shot ammo for heat FS, which gives it more penetration and much better performance against angled armor. It sits at an increased BR and gets up tiered quite frequently though, so do your best to stay out of sight. Lastly, we have the DF-105, a German-French prototype vehicle. It combines the hull of the Marder with the French oscillating turret. As a result, it has great mobility in both forwards and reverse, and a devastating 105mm cannon. You also get a 5-second autoloader. Like the previous two lights though, it only has 3 crew members and doesn't have much armor. Combined with its large size, you need to think about your positioning and play smart. The medium tank line contains the Lorraine 40 tonnes, Char 25 tonnes, and the AMX 30. The Lorraine is a versatile medium tank built upon the chassis of the Canon d'Assaut, and it improves upon the previous medium tanks, featuring some great mobility, a formidable 100mm cannon, and a whopping 4-second reload rate. The 40T makes a solid flanker and sniper. Likewise, the Char 25 is also very agile, and it has an autoloaded cannon, but also a reverse gearbox and a slightly less powerful gun with APHE. Something both vehicles share is their lack of armor. Pretty much any tank cannon will pierce them from the front, so you have to either ambush the enemy or stay behind your teammates. And finally, we have the AMX 30 1972, a step in a different direction. Being the first MBT in the tech tree, it abandons the bulky design of the past and has a more streamlined layout. As a result, it has very good mobility but gets rid of the oscillating turret in favor of a more conventional design, therefore lacking an autoloader. That being said, it does have a couple of tricks up its sleeve, like a reverse gearbox, an optical rangefinder, and a coaxial 20mm autocannon, something which comes in very handy against light vehicles. Armor is limited as usual, so make use of its good mobility to stay on the move. It has a strong 105mm cannon with lethal hit rounds, so sniping is a very viable choice. In the heavy tank line, you'll find the AMX 50-100 and the Surbaissé. The TOA 100 is pretty much a direct upgrade from the AMX M4, with a 100mm cannon and a faster autoloader. While it does have better armor as well, it doesn't stand much of a chance at this battle rating. It plays very similarly to the Lorraine 40T, being a versatile flanker, medium-range sniper, and ambusher. The Surbaissé, on the other hand, is a tall and imposing heavy tank. As you might have noticed, its defining feature is the massive 120mm cannon, with up to 300mm of raw penetration and a 6-second reload rate, along with an optical rangefinder. It can eliminate one tank after another with minimal effort. Nevertheless, while it is classified as a heavy, it plays much more like a medium tank, with relatively thin armor and surprisingly good mobility. Long-range sniping and some light flanking is the way to go. Just be careful to not expose yourself much. Last but not least, we have the tank destroyers with the AUF-1, the AMX-10M, and the AMX-50 Foch. These three are vastly different vehicles, but do have some things in common. The Automoteur Model F1 is a self-propelled howitzer built on top of the AMX-30 chassis. This means that it has pretty good mobility, not much armor, but a devastating cannon. It plays like a more mobile M109 with an autoloader, so help out your allies and try to stay under the radar. Meanwhile, the AMX-10M is a casemate tank destroyer with a 142mm gun launcher that fires ATGMs. Thanks to its relatively low profile and good mobility, it can sneak across the map and get to a vantage point, and afterwards launch its powerful missiles and snipe enemies from long distances. Armor is non-existent as usual, but the previous factors make up for it. Lastly, we have the AMX-50 Foch, another casemate tank destroyer. While it looks similar to the Canon d'Assaut Lorraine, the Foch had some very thick frontal armor, capable of stopping nearly any kinetic type of munition, but it struggles against shells like HIT-FS. Along with this, it has some decent mobility, an optical rangefinder, and carries the same 120mm cannon as on the Surbaissé. Sadly, it lacks an autoloader, so reloading can take 19 seconds with a stock crew, leaving you extremely vulnerable after firing. To make most of the Foch, find a concealed position with good visibility on the front lines and engage enemies from a distance. After all the iconic post-war designs, we have reached the modern tanks with rank 6. The light tank line contains the Mars 15, the MX-13 Hot, the MX-10 RC, and one particular vehicle that reminds me of somebody, the SK-105A2. Maybe you also know what I mean. Besides that, we also have the VII-VIII. There are a lot of vehicles to cover, but they mostly fit into the same role. So let's do a speed round. The Mars was built to be the replacement for the aging AMX-13. It has access to HIT-FS and APF-SDS, as well as a reverse gearbox. While it doesn't have an autoloader, it still has a respectable reload rate. The AMX-13 Hot is an AMX-13 with hot missiles. What did you expect? It carries a total of 6 deadly ATGMs, but at this increased battle rating, its main gun might have some difficulties. Next, we have the AMX-10 Roux Canon, a wheeled APC that carries a 105mm cannon. On top of that, it has hydropneumatic suspension, a reverse gearbox, and thermals. Its reload is pretty long though, so make sure to relocate frequently. The SK-105 is comparable to the DF-105, with an autoloader and a cannon of the same caliber, but with access to APF-SDS. Along with this, it also has thermals, but lacks the reverse speed of the DF. Lastly, we have the Véhicule Blindé de Combat d'Infanterie, or Armored AFV in English. It's a wheeled reconnaissance vehicle with lots of gadgets at its disposal, like electro-optical APS, a laser warning system, tracking radar against aircraft, and 2-plane stabilizer. If you can manage to flank the enemy, you can rip into their sides with the 25mm autocannon, but you won't pen much from the front. To wrap it up, all 6 of these vehicles are great flankers with high top speeds and punchy cannons, but they don't have much armor and have small numbers of crew members, so it's important to keep moving and stay out of sight. The medium tank line turns into the MBT line with the AMX-30B2 and the B2 Brennus. The B2 variant is nearly identical to the 1972 model, but with a laser rangefinder, thermals, and access to APF-SDS. The Brennus features improvements with a better engine, ERA blocks around the tank, and electro-optical APS against guided missiles. They continue to have good mobility and the coaxial 20mm autocannons, but not having a stabilizer at this BR really hurts. That being said, they're best at long-range sniping, so use their mobility to get to a vantage point and shoot away. The heavy tank line turns into another MBT line with the AMX-32s. These two are sub-variants of the AMX-30 designed for export markets. Compared to the B2, the main selling point of the AMX-32-105 is its 2-plane stabilizer, which is a must-have at this rank. It also has a slightly bulkier design and ESS, which, well, doesn't change much. The later variant is similar, but with a much better 120mm cannon, a more powerful engine, and better protection on its gun mantlet. Armor is by no means good though, pretty much anything at this BR will be able to penetrate you. Overall, the addition of the stabilizer lets these two play a lot more aggressively than the MX-30s, but they fit into a similar role, so flanking and sniping should be your priority. In the SPA line, you'll find the AMX-30S DCA and the Santal. The Défense contre-avion features two 30mm autocannons mounted on the hull of the AMX-30, with a search and track radar as well. It's similar to the Gepard, but it doesn't have a limit on the APDS belt, which turns it into a potent anti-tank vehicle as well. On the other hand, the Santal, or the Système Antiaérien Autonome Léger, is a surface-to-air missile system. It carries 6 Mistral fire and forget missiles, which have solid range, pull, and speed at this BR. Along with this, it's very fast, but lacks any sort of armor, so stay hidden and relocate after every shot. Lastly, we have the tank destroyers, with the AMX-30 Accra and Mephisto. The Anti-Char Rapide Autopropulsé, or self-propelled fast anti-tank in English, is a variant of the AMX-30 with a 145mm gun launcher, the same as on the AMX-10M. It can fire guided missiles with 700mm of penetration, which is respectable, but it still struggles against ERA. It has a 15-second reload as well, so you definitely don't want to get caught with your pants down, so we employ hidden and run tactics. The Mephisto, on the other hand, is built on the same chassis as the Santal, but carries hot ATGMs instead of Mistrals. It also has great mobility, excellent optics, 2-plane stabilizer, thermals, and gets access to Hot 2 missiles. Thanks to the forward launchers it has, it can play more aggressively than the Accra. But keep in mind that it has no armor whatsoever, so stay on the move. Finally, we reach tier 7 and 8, featuring the most modern and competitive tanks in the French tree. The light tank line only contains a single vehicle, that being the Vextra 105. Like the AMX-10 RC, the Vextra is an extremely fast reconnaissance vehicle with a strong 105mm cannon. It improves on what the RC did best with a much higher top speed and a more powerful variant of the same gun. Along with this, it also gets access to a 2-plane stabilizer and better optics, making it even better at this playstyle. Sadly, it lacks an autoloader and has no armor, so you need to be smart with your flanking maneuvers. In the first MBT line, we have the MSC and 4 variants of the Leclerc series. The Mulet Système Complet is a prototype for the Leclercs, and it's a big upgrade from the MX-30s with a 2-plane stabilizer and a much better engine. You also get a 120mm cannon and an autoloader. It's comparable to the Leopard 2A4 in many ways. They both have similar protection, great mobility and firepower, and good optics, but the MSC has an edge over the Leopard with its 6-second autoloader and slightly better APF-SDS. After the prototype, we have the Leclerc tank itself. This line of MBT can be described as jack of all trades. They're decent in most aspects like mobility and firepower, but they don't excel in anything either. The base model is very similar to the MSC, just with a modified hull and turret design, access to the OFL 120 F1 APF-SDS shell, a 5-second autoloader instead of a 6-second one, and integrated ERA to protect the ammo rack behind the turret. Like the Japanese MBTs, the very fast autoloader gives these tanks a big advantage in firefights. The second series is identical to the first series, but with 2.5 tons of extra weight caused by the addition of air conditioning inside the tank. The Series 21 is the exact same as the S2, but you have commander thermals and slightly better composite armor in the turret. Nothing substantial. Lastly, for the Azur, or Action en Zone Urbaine, it's an S2 designed for urban environments, with a laser warning system and ERA blocks on the sides of the hull. In short, all 4 variants of the Leclercs are very similar, featuring decent mobility, good firepower, but lackluster armor. Like I said, they are jack of all trades vehicles, but masters of none. Their biggest advantage is the 5-second reload and good darts, as well as their agility. They can do a bit of everything, like flanking, sniping, and even some urban close quarters combat, but be careful not to expose yourself too much, because their armor might not stop anything at this BR. The second MBT line contains the AMX-40 and the Dutch Leopard series. The AMX-40 is a very similar vehicle to the AMX-32, with just some composite armor and much more powerful engine, but a lack of a reverse gearbox. As you might expect, it plays identically to the 32, so stay out of sight and on the move. The Dutch Leopards, on the other hand, are identical to their German counterparts. As I said before, the 2A4 is similar to the MSC with great mobility and firepower, but not the best armor. The 2A5 takes it a step further with better turret armor and access to the DM53 dart with up to 620mm of penetration. The 2A6 is the final upgrade, with a longer L55 cannon which gives the DM53 even more penetration. Expectedly, these 3 play the same as their German variants, so flanking and sniping are what they're best at. Try to stay hull down though, as their chassis can get penetrated by pretty much any cannon at this BR. Lastly, we have the anti-air line with the Roland 1 and ITO 90M. The Roland is the predecessor to the German Flak Panzer, using the same launcher system and similar missiles. The Roland surface-to-air missiles are slow, but maneuverable missiles with decent range. Enemy jets won't have much problem dodging them, but they can be decent against helicopters. Its reload sequence is quite annoying though. The turret spins to the front and you have to wait 5 seconds to be able to move it again, which leaves you vulnerable if you miss your second missile. In contrast, the ITO 90M is a Finnish 6x6 armored personnel carrier with the French Crotal surface-to-air missile system. The VT-1 missiles it fires have decent speed, pull and range. and the vehicle itself has thermals that can go up to 82 kilometers or 51 miles per hour once you spade it. It can be pretty slow when it's stuck, but with a couple of modifications it can be a real threat to enemy aircraft. Now we arrive at the conclusion, starting with the pros and cons. The first thing that comes to mind are the vehicles with autoloaders at tier 4 and 5, like the Lorraine 40T and AMX-13. Almost no other tank at their BRs have as quick reloads as they do, which gives them a big advantage in firefights. Along with this, the French tanks at tier 3 and above carry some very powerful cannons as well, which can pierce through some heavy tanks from the front. Like British tanks though, APHE is only found on a handful of vehicles in the entire tree, so you'll have to aim for weak spots. Like I said again, thanks to the autoloader, you can fire shells in rapid succession until the enemy is destroyed. Just keep an eye on your first stage ammo storage. Another big con is the lack of stabilizers until very late in the tree. While most tanks get 2-plane stabilizers at around 8.0, French tanks only get access to it at rank 7, which limits their MBT's playstyles. This is amplified thanks to the lack of armor on most French tanks as well. You can bounce an occasional shot or two, but most tanks in the tree do not have reliable protection. Lastly, a lot of French tanks don't have good optics. You'll be lucky to find a tank below rank 7 that can zoom in at all. Most of them are stuck at a certain zoom, which makes sniping a bit difficult. Now for the rankings. French tanks are best suited for the flanking and supporting roles, with most tanks having good mobility as well as quick and destructive firepower. Sniping is possible in theory, but the lack of good optics make it difficult to see enemies far away. Thanks to their autoloaders, brawling is also an option, but French armor is not suited for close ranges. For the ranks, the early tiers are pretty atrocious, but the tree starts to slowly get better and better as it goes on, peaking at rank 4 and 5. The early MBTs are not the best, but top tier is solid with the Leclercs and Leopards. French close air support can be described as decent enough thanks to the imported American strike aircraft and their jets. The anti-air line is just sufficient, nothing special. Now we have a big question. Should you play the French tank tree? If you're a beginner, it's probably one of the worst choices you can make. For some perspective, tier 1 is on par with early Japanese tanks in terms of performance, but this time with only solid shot ammo at your disposal. You'll have to stick with a small handful of tanks to get you through tier 1 and 2, and it's definitely not meant for new players. If you're looking for a new nation to grind, it's really not a bad choice though. The tree contains its fair share of copy-pasted vehicles, but the majority of tanks are domestically built, and some of them are very unique, and while their top tier is not amazing, they're nothing to scoff at either. If you're just looking to have some fun, French tanks are a good choice. The MX-13 and Lorraine 40T, for example, are really unique tanks that you cannot find anywhere else, and those are just two examples. They provide a fun challenge that requires you to use map knowledge and experience, and once you locate a big group of enemies, you can take them out one by one thanks to the autoloaders. If you want some recommendations, SK recommends the AMX-13 and the AMX-M4. What I recommend though is that you build yourself a really good 7.7 lineup. You can have a lot of fun vehicles, 4-second reloads, some big armor, and you can have some insane fun at that BR, even if you get bored of the game. That's it guys, but do not forget, the way you pronounce the AMX-50 is the surbaissé.